I'm 84 years old, and if you're watching this right now, I need you to stop for just a moment. Not because I want your attention, but because I may be talking to your future. There is something I wish someone had told me when I was your age. Something no doctor ever warned me about. Something no test ever detected. It wasn't cancer. It wasn't a heart attack. It wasn't a stroke or diabetes or old age itself. Those things are loud. They announce themselves. What took my life was quiet. So quiet that I didn't even notice it arriving. It didn't hurt. It didn't scare me. It didn't send me to a hospital. It simply settled in, day after day, year after year. By the time I realized what it was doing to me, it had already taken decades, not from my body, but from my life. You see, most people think life ends when the heart stops beating. That's not true. For many of us, life ends much earlier, while we're still breathing, still walking, still saying, "I'm fine." I said that for years. I'm fine. I'm just tired. I'll do it later. There's still time. Doctors told me my numbers looked okay. Friends said I was doing well for my age. Family assumed everything was normal. And on the outside, it was. But inside, something was slowly shutting down. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just quietly. Little by little, my days became shorter, not in hours, but in meaning. I stopped noticing mornings. I stopped feeling excited about tomorrow. I stopped moving as much, talking as much, dreaming as much. Nothing felt wrong enough to worry about. That's how it wins. This silent killer doesn't take you all at once. It takes one ordinary day, then another, until one morning you wake up and realize you're still alive, but you're no longer fully living. If you're over 60 and listening to this, please hear me clearly. This message is not meant to scare you. It's meant to reach you. Because this thing doesn't care how smart you are. It doesn't care how strong you used to be. And it doesn't wait for permission. It waits for comfort, for routine, for silence. And once it settles in, it doesn't rush. It's patient. Far more patient than you think. That's why I'm speaking now. At 84, with the honesty only age allows. Because if someone had warned me back then, I would have listened. And I don't want you to learn this lesson the way I did. Slowly, quietly, and far too late. My name doesn't really matter anymore. Names matter when you're building something. A career, a reputation, a future. At 84, what matters more is what's left behind, and what's been lost. I'm 84 years old now. Most mornings I wake up before the sun does. Not because I'm disciplined, not because I want to. Sleep just doesn't stay with me the way it used to. It comes lightly, like a visitor who doesn't plan to stay long. And when it leaves, it takes comfort with it. So I lie there in the dark, listening. The house is quiet now, not the peaceful kind of quiet. The heavy kind, the kind that presses on your chest. Every sound stands out. The clock ticking, the refrigerator humming, my own breathing. There was a time when silence felt like rest, when I looked forward to it. Now silence feels like proof of who's gone, proof of how much has changed, proof of how small my world has become. If you had asked me at 40 who I was, I would have answered quickly, confidently, a worker, a provider, a busy man with places to go. At 60, I would have said the same thing, just with a little more pride. I'm fine. I'm busy. I'll slow down later. Those words followed me for decades. I used them when I missed dinners. I used them when I postponed walks. I used them when I ignored the quiet feeling that something inside me was being neglected. I'll slow down later sounded responsible. It sounded grown up. It sounded safe. What it really was a delay on living. Later never arrived. Instead, One day I woke up and realized that slowing down hadn't been a choice. It had become a condition. My body didn't ask anymore. It decided. My energy didn't fade suddenly. It leaked out slowly, like air from a tire you don't notice until it's flat. I didn't become lonely overnight. I just stopped reaching out, one call at a time. I didn't lose purpose in one moment. I misplaced it gradually, until I forgot where I'd left it. That sentence, "I'll slow down later," didn't ruin my life loudly. It ruined it quietly. Because it taught me to postpone joy, to postpone movement, to postpone connection. And when you postpone life long enough, life moves on without you. Now at 84, I understand something I couldn't see back then. Busy is not the same as alive. Quiet is not the same as peaceful. And later is often just another word for never. That's who I am now. Not broken, not bitter, just awake. Much later than I wish I had been. I worked hard, harder than I needed to, harder than anyone ever asked me to. And for a long time, I was proud of that. Work gave me a reason to wake up. It gave me structure. It gave me an identity I could point to and say, "This is who I am." So I chose it, again and again. I missed dinners because there was one more task. I arrived late to moments that mattered, telling myself I'd make it up later. I skipped walks because I was too tired, even though I spent the whole evening sitting. I postponed joy, real joy, because I believed there was more time waiting somewhere ahead of me. Time felt endless back then, expandable, forgiving. Doctors told me my numbers were fine. Blood pressure? Fine. Sugar? Acceptable. Heart? Still beating strong enough. Every visit ended the same way. Keep doing what you're doing. So I did. I thought I was winning. But no one ever told me the most important truth. You can be medically alive and still slowly disappearing. It doesn't show up on tests. It doesn't trigger alarms. It doesn't make anyone worry. It just happens quietly. Inside. I didn't wake up one day and decide to disappear. I just started choosing the easier option. I stopped calling friends, not because I didn't care, but because conversations felt like effort. I told myself I'd call tomorrow. Tomorrow became next week. Next week became next year. I stopped moving, not completely, just a little less each year. I parked closer. I sat longer. I stood up slower. Nothing dramatic enough to notice. I stopped feeling excited. Not sad, not depressed, just neutral. Days blended together. Weeks passed without landmarks. Life became manageable, but smaller. That's when it starts. Not when something breaks, but when nothing challenges you anymore. Not when pain arrives, but when curiosity leaves. I mistook comfort for safety. I mistook routine for stability. What I didn't realize was that comfort was quietly shrinking my world. Every skipped walk made the next one harder. Every ignored call made silence easier. Every postponed joy made joy feel less familiar. And the cruel part? No one warned me, because from the outside, everything looked fine. I was functioning. I was responsible. I was doing well for my age. But inside, something vital was fading. Not my health, my aliveness. Looking back now, I understand this with painful clarity. Life doesn't disappear in one moment. It fades through 1,000 small decisions, each one reasonable on its own, and by the time you notice what's gone, you're left wondering where the years went. Those were the years that disappeared, quietly, politely, without ever asking permission. Here's the truth doctors never said out loud. Not because they're cruel, not because they don't care, but because this truth doesn't fit neatly on a chart or a screen. The silent life killer isn't depression. It isn't illness. It isn't even aging itself. It's something quieter. It's the gradual withdrawal from life, piece by piece, without ever realizing you're doing it. No one wakes up and decides to disappear. It happens in small, reasonable choices. You sit more because it's comfortable. You talk less because silence feels easier. You stop challenging your body because rest seems wiser. You stop sharing your thoughts because it feels like no one needs to hear them anymore. None of these things feel dangerous. They feel normal, responsible even. And that's why this killer is so powerful. As your world slowly shrinks, you don't notice the walls closing in. Your muscles weaken, not from disease, but from disuse. Your balance fades, not from injury, but from avoidance. Your memory dulls, not because it's broken, but because it's rarely asked to stretch. This doesn't happen overnight. There's no sudden drop. So you don't panic. You adapt. You adjust your expectations. You change your routines. You tell yourself, this is just how it is now. That sentence is the most dangerous one of all, because adaptation feels like wisdom. It feels mature. But adaptation can also be surrender. And surrender is quiet. You walk slower, so you stop noticing how far you used to go. You speak less, so you forget how sharp your thoughts still are. You move carefully, so your body forgets how capable it once was. And no one sounds the alarm. Family thinks you're slowing down naturally. Doctors see nothing urgent. Friends assume you're busy or tired. So the withdrawal continues. One less invitation accepted. One less opinion shared. One less reason to leave the house, until life feels manageable, but small. And that's the tragedy. Because the body is incredibly forgiving, but only when it's reminded it's still needed. The mind is remarkably resilient, but only when it's engaged. When we stop asking things of ourselves, the body and mind don't protest. They comply. That compliance feels like peace. But it's not. It's the early stage of disappearance. And here's the part I wish someone had told me sooner. Once this kind of withdrawal becomes your normal, reversing it becomes harder. Not impossible, but harder. Because comfort rewires your expectations. Because silence becomes familiar. Because stillness feels safer than effort. By the time you realize what's happening, you don't feel afraid. You feel resigned. And that's why this silent killer is so dangerous. It doesn't attack. It waits, patiently, for you to slowly step away from life and call it aging. If I could go back, not to be young again, not to change everything, just to stand inside a few ordinary days I rushed through and live them differently. I wouldn't work harder. I already gave enough hours, enough energy, enough pieces of myself away. I wouldn't chase more money. Money helped me survive, but it never taught me how to live. And I wouldn't worry so much, not about the future, not about appearances, not about things that never happened. What I would do instead is almost painfully simple. I would move more, not to impress anyone, not to stay fit, just to remind my body that it was still alive. I would walk even when it felt inconvenient. I would stretch even when it felt unnecessary. I would stand up instead of sitting down, not because I had to, but because I could. I would speak my thoughts, even the awkward ones, even the unfinished ones. I would stop shrinking my voice to avoid bothering people. I would tell stories that didn't have a point. I would say how I really felt. Before silence became my default language. I would sit in sunlight, not rushing past windows, not under artificial lights. I would let warmth touch my skin and remind me that the world was still there. Waiting, I would have protected my aliveness, not just my health. Because health, I've learned, is only the foundation. Aliveness is what you build on top of it. And here is the cruel truth, the one that arrives too late for most of us. At 84, you don't regret the risks you took. You don't regret the conversations that went nowhere. You don't regret the times you looked foolish trying something new. You don't regret the moments you stepped outside routine. You regret the days you stayed comfortable. Comfort feels harmless in the moment. It feels deserved. It feels safe. But comfort is expensive. It charges you slowly, in strength, in curiosity, in connection. It charges you your future. Every time you choose comfort over movement, the body learns to do less. Every time you choose silence over expression, the mind learns to retreat. Every time you choose routine over engagement, the world grows smaller. And the worst part, you don't feel the cost right away. You pay it later when you try to remember who you used to be. If someone had told me this earlier, I would have listened. Not because I was afraid of dying, but because I was afraid of not truly living while I still had the chance. That's the regret that stays with you. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady, like a quiet ache that never fully goes away. If you're over 60, listen carefully, not with fear, not with defensiveness, but with honesty, because what I'm about to say is not meant for everyone. It's meant for the person who quietly recognizes themselves in these words. If your days look almost the same, if weeks pass without a real, meaningful conversation, if your body hasn't been challenged in months, not punished, just used, if you're always resting, but somehow never feel refreshed, then this message is for you. And I need you to hear this clearly. You are not lazy. You are not weak. You are not broken. What's happening to you is far more subtle and far more common. You are slowly disconnecting from life itself. Not dramatically, not intentionally, quietly. It doesn't start with giving up. It starts with adjusting. You sit a little more because it's easier. You cancel plans because staying home feels simpler. You stop reaching out because you don't want to be a burden. You tell yourself, this is just part of getting older. That sentence is dangerous because aging does not demand disconnection. Disconnection just pretends to be aging. Here's the truth most people don't want to face. When days repeat without meaning, the mind shrinks. When the body isn't gently challenged, it weakens faster than it should. When you stop being needed, or believing you're needed, the spirit goes quiet, and none of this shows up on a medical test. Doctors look at your charts and say, everything looks normal, but inside something feels off. You don't feel sad enough to ask for help. You don't feel sick enough to worry. You just feel dimmer, less sharp, less interested, less alive. That's not failure. That's withdrawal. And withdrawal, if left unchecked, becomes a habit. The longer you stay disconnected, the harder reconnection feels. Not because you can't, but because comfort convinces you not to try. Comfort whispers lies. It says, you've earned rest. You've done enough. There's no rush. But comfort doesn't tell you what it costs. It doesn't tell you that muscles only remember strength if they're reminded. It doesn't tell you that balance disappears when it's avoided. It doesn't tell you that the mind dulls when it's no longer invited to engage. And worst of all, comfort doesn't tell you that time is not as generous as it once was. That's why I'm saying this plainly. With no soft edges, this can still be reversed, but only if you act now. Not tomorrow, when motivation might be lower. Not next year, when habits are deeper. Not someday, when someday quietly disappears. Now. Reversal doesn't mean running marathons or reinventing yourself. It means interruption. Interrupting silence with one conversation. Interrupting stillness with one walk. Interrupting isolation with one decision that says, I'm still here. The body responds quickly when it's reminded. The mind wakes up faster than you expect. The spirit returns the moment it's invited back. But here's the part I need you to understand. And this matters. Waiting feels harmless, but waiting is a choice. And every day you delay reconnection, disconnection gets more comfortable. I know this because I waited. I told myself I'd start later. I told myself there was time. I told myself slowing down was wisdom. By the time I realized what I'd lost, it wasn't gone forever. But reclaiming it took more than it should have. You don't need urgency because you're afraid of dying. You need urgency because you deserve to live fully while you still can. If something inside you feels stirred right now, even slightly, don't ignore that. That feeling is not guilt. It's recognition. And recognition is the moment before change. Please don't let it pass. Not tomorrow, not next year, now. Because disconnection is quiet. But so is the choice to come back to life. And that choice is still yours. The solution is not extreme. It doesn't ask you to become someone new. It doesn't demand discipline or pain or willpower. It's quiet. It's gentle. It's human. In fact, it begins smaller than most people expect. Start with one daily movement, not exercise the way the world sells it. Just movement that reminds your body it still belongs to you. A slow walk down the street. A stretch after waking up. Standing in the sunlight for a few minutes and letting warmth reach your skin, that's enough. Your body doesn't need to be punished. It doesn't need to be pushed. It needs reminders that it is still needed. Movement is not about strength at this age. It's about communication. Each step says, I'm still here. Then start with one daily connection. Not a long conversation, not anything dramatic. A phone call, a short message, a wave to a neighbor, a few honest words with someone at the store. Connection doesn't have to be deep to be real. Your mind and heart just need proof that you still exist in someone else's day. Isolation tells you no one notices you. Connection quietly proves that isn't true. And finally, start with one daily purpose. Purpose doesn't mean productivity. It doesn't mean being useful in a traditional sense. It means having a reason to care about the day. Watering a plant, feeding a pet, writing a few lines in a notebook, listening carefully to someone else's story, something small that waits for you, something that would be missed if you didn't show up. Your mind doesn't need more noise. It doesn't need constant stimulation. It needs meaning. Meaning is what keeps the mind awake and curious. And here's what I've learned. Looking back, when you do these three things, even imperfectly, something shifts. The body remembers how to respond. The mind becomes sharper, then softer. The days regain shape. You don't feel younger. You feel present. And presence is what we lose first and need the most. Do these things not because you want more years. Do them because you want better ones. Because living fully isn't about how long you last. It's about how much of yourself you bring into each day. Start small. Start gently. Start today. Not with urgency, with kindness. Life doesn't ask for perfection. It asks for participation. And it's still waiting for you. At 84, I've learned this. And I say it without anger, without regret sharp enough to cut. Aging isn't the enemy. Silence is. Not the peaceful silence of rest or reflection, but the kind that settles in when we stop reaching outward. The kind that fills the space where curiosity used to live. The kind that grows louder the longer it's ignored. I used to think aging was about losing things. Strength, speed, memory. Now I understand that aging is mostly about what we stop doing. We stop asking questions. We stop expressing opinions. We stop placing ourselves in the world. And slowly, the world stops placing itself in us. Stillness, when chosen with intention, is healing. But stillness without intention is decay. It looks the same on the surface, sitting, resting, being quiet. But inside it's very different. Intentional stillness restores you. Unintentional stillness slowly erases you. The same is true for rest. Rest is meant to prepare you to return, to re-enter life with clarity. Rest without return is surrender. And surrender doesn't always feel like giving up. Sometimes it feels like relief. That's why it's so easy to miss. You don't need to become younger. That's a misunderstanding we've all been taught. Youth isn't energy. Youth isn't speed. Youth isn't appearance. Youth is engagement. It's the willingness to stay involved with people, with ideas, with the physical world around you. You can be old and deeply engaged. You can be young and completely absent. Engagement is what keeps life close. Looking back now, I see how often I mistook withdrawal for wisdom. I thought pulling back meant maturity. I thought quiet meant peace. I thought slowing down meant I was being sensible. Sometimes it did, but sometimes it didn't. Sometimes it was just fear wearing sensible clothes. Fear of effort. Fear of discomfort. Fear of discovering what had changed. And fear has a strange way of shrinking life. It makes rooms feel smaller, days feel shorter, the future feel less inviting. Life doesn't leave us. That's the hardest truth. And the most important one. We slowly step away from it, not in protest, not in despair, but in tiny steps that feel harmless. One less walk, one less call, one less reason to leave the house. Until one day, life feels far away, even though it never moved. I wish I had understood sooner that staying engaged doesn't require grand effort. It requires presence, noticing the morning light, listening fully when someone speaks, choosing movement over comfort just often enough. Engagement is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It's quiet, like a door you choose to open instead of walking past. At 84, I no longer chase outcomes. I don't measure days by productivity or success. I measure them by participation. Did I show up? Did I connect? Did I remain curious? Those questions matter more than anything I achieved. And here's what I want you to know, especially if you're still in your 60s or early 70s. You are not late. As long as you are breathing, you are not late. Reconnection does not demand perfection. It only asks for intention. Even now, life is waiting for your attention, not impatiently, not judgmentally, just quietly, the same way it always has. And if you listen closely, beneath the noise, beneath the habits, beneath the fear, you'll hear it, not calling you back to youth, calling you back to yourself.